Night numbers. Statement. Recorded transcript. Portions reconstructed from written report and audio. Not sure if this will fit on that paper you got there. May want to voice record my story and let your phone transcribe it. Anyway, I'm going to say up front that I don't drink on the job. I don't use anything either. Never have. You can test me if you want. I understand why you'd ask. I haul camper trailers. Long haul contracts. Fifth wheels mostly. Sometimes motorhomes. It depends on the job. I move them from storage yards to dealerships or between lots when companies change hands. Or when somebody dies and no one in the family knows what to do with a 30-foot mistake sitting in the woods. I live in the truck. There's a sleeper cab behind the seats. Not glamorous, but it works. I used to manage a mattress store. Big one. Regional chain. Made more money there. Also aged about 10 years in 3. This job is quieter. I'm hoping it gets me to retirement without killing me first. The camper I was hauling that week wasn't mine to enter. That was in the paperwork. I don't touch interiors unless I'm contracted to. It's a liability thing. You don't want to be blamed for whatever people leave behind. The route was through Ozarks. Forest highway. Narrow in places. Spotty service. Contract nobody else wanted. That should have been a sign, I guess. But it usually isn't. Sometimes it just means the pay's bad or the schedule's tight. The night I first heard the broadcast, I was at a diner off the highway. One of those places with a name that doesn't show up on maps anymore. Gas station attached. I was halfway through a sandwich I didn't really want when I heard it. I didn't know what it was at first, just numbers. Calm, evenly spaced. Coming from somewhere behind the counter, I thought, like a radio left on too low. I asked the waitress what station they were playing. She said nothing was on. I told her I could hear it. She smiled at me the way people do when they don't want to argue with someone who looks tired. I didn't push it, I just listened. It was definitely a number station. I used to hear them when I was a kid, shortwave stuff, Cold War leftovers. Spooky but harmless, or at least that's what people said. This one was clean, clear, coordinated. I realized later, at the time, they were just numbers, but coordinates. Latitude and longitude spoken slow enough to write down if you wanted. I didn't write them down. I did notice the frequency on the radio dial inside the kitchen. I could see it in the pass-through window. Old AM number. Stuck in my head. I've always been good with numbers. Store inventory will do that to you. When I got back to the truck, I didn't turn on the radio. I usually don't. I listen to audiobooks off my phone. Keeps the mind busy. But I remembered something then. See, my dad had a shortwave radio, old thing, heavy, analog dial. He used to sit in the garage and tune it at night. Said it helped him sleep. When he passed, I took it. Didn't really know why. It sat in a box until I wired it into the truck last year. Never used it much. That night I did. It took a minute to find the frequency. Longer than I expected. Static, bleed through, nothing at all. Then it came in clean, like I had been waiting. Same voice, same numbers. I remember thinking it was funny in a way, like hearing an old jingle you forgot you knew. I figured it was coincidence. Atmospheric skip. AM does weird things in the mountains. The numbers kept coming. They didn't stop when I drove. They didn't change when I turned. They just kept reading. Calm as anything. While the forest closed in on both sides of the road. I drove like that for a while. Hours, actually. I didn't feel scared. just attentive. Like you get when something doesn't quite line up, but you haven't decided it's a problem. It wasn't until later, when I had to pull out the map, that I realized I'd heard those numbers somewhere before. I don't rely on GPS when I don't have to. It's a habit. Cell service drops out in the Ozarks more than people think. I don't like surprises when I'm towing something that weighs more than my first apartment. That night, it dropped out hard. No bars, no map tiles loading, just the blue dot floating in gray nothing. I pulled onto the shoulder where it widened enough to be safe and dug the road atlas out from behind the passenger seat. Old thing, spiral bound. Pages soft from use. The radio kept going while I did. Same voice, same pace. Wasn't really listening until I noticed I was turning pages to the same numbers I was hearing. Latitude first, then longitude. Degrees, minutes, seconds. Not random. Not repeating the same way music does, precise and dry. I told myself it was coincidence. Then I traced one of the coordinates with my finger and realized it was on the road I'd just missed. I didn't panic. Not yet. I figured maybe I'd anchored the sound in my head and was retrofitting meaning to it. People do that. I've had customers swear their mattress was crooked because their floor sloped. Same thing. I rerouted using the map. Longer way, slower forest, service road for a stretch before reconnecting with the highway. The numbers changed. All at once. They just shifted, like someone correcting a decimal. That was when I turned the radio down a notch. Didn't turn it off. I didn't want to lose it entirely. Can't really explain why. A few miles later, I came around a bend and saw light in the pasture off the road. Red and blue. Rangers and county vehicles. A cluster of them. I slowed instinctively. There were cattle, or what was left of them. I didn't stop. They waved me through. One of the deputies stepped closer as I passed, pointed ahead, then made a rolling motion with his hand to keep going. At the next pull-off, one of the rangers flagged me down anyway. Asked where I was headed. I told him the truth. Storage yard's dealership. Contract number if he wanted it. He didn't. He just told me once I was past the next forest stretch, I wasn't to stop for any reason. Didn't say why. I asked if there was an accident ahead. He said no. I asked if there was an animal loose. He looked at the camper, then he looked at my cab. Then he told me to drive. I did. The number had stopped repeating by then. They were moving steadily now. No pauses, no stutters. Like whatever they were tracking had decided to commit to a direction. I tried to tell myself that was because I had. That's important. I want that on record. At the time, I believed the numbers were following the road. Or me. Or both. I did not think about the trailer. I hadn't heard anything from it. No shifting or no banging. It was sealed. Quiet. Somewhere after midnight, fatigue caught up with me. Hard. My eyes stung and my thoughts stretched out too long. I saw a sign for a campground. Closed for the season. Gate chained, but wide enough to pull in beside. If you knew what you were doing. I knew I shouldn't. They told me not to stop. But I told myself, 5 minutes. Just enough to close my eyes. Engine off. Lights out. The radio was still on when I parked. The numbers repeated. Not the same ones as before. These were closer together. I slept anyway. When I woke up, I don't know how long had passed. The truck was cold. The forest was quiet. The radio was still speaking, repeating the same numbers over and over. And something was wrong with the weight. I felt it in the suspension when I started the engine. A subtle shift. Like the load had settled wrong, or like something inside it had changed position. I did not check the trailer. I pulled back onto the road and drove. I was about to switch on an audiobook, but then I noticed the numbers change again. I didn't stop for a long time after that. I kept both hands on the wheel and told myself the suspension thing was normal. Load shift. Tires cool unevenly. Your body invents explanations when it's tired enough. I've done this long enough to know that. The forest thinned out after a while and closed in again. Same trees, different shapes. I passed a sign for a gas station that looked hand-painted. No lights on. I drove past it. The radio kept speaking. I wasn't writing the numbers down or anything. I could feel them lining up in my head anyway, stacking themselves without permission. They were familiar now. Short changes, minor corrections. I guess I left them running because on some level I was puzzling it out without really focusing on it. I remember thinking that it was clearly tracking well, something. That thought made me feel better for about 30 seconds. The next gas station was worse. This one had pumps, but no cars. Lights on inside, but nobody visible. Forest pressing in tight around the lot. No road noise, no bugs. It felt like the kind of place you'd see in daylight, never think about again, which somehow made it worse at night. I pulled in anyway. I shouldn't have. I know that now. But my hands were shaking and I needed to step out of the cab, if only to prove to myself I could. I left the engine running. I didn't turn the radio off. As soon as I opened the door, I heard it. Not from the radio, from the trailer. At first it sounded like settling, metal cooling, a creak that didn't finish properly, then a slow dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across a surface that didn't quite give. I stood there with the cab door open, one foot on the ground, listening. The radio kept reading numbers behind me. They didn't speed up, they didn't change tone, they didn't react. That's the part I keep coming back to. Whatever system was doing the tracking didn't care that I was standing there, frozen, staring at my own breath fogging in the air. The noise came back again, closer to the front of the trailer this time. I backed into the cab and shut the door. I told myself it was an animal, raccoon, bear even. Something had climbed up while I was parked. I told myself that it could be a man with a weapon, an escaped convict or somebody on the run. I pulled out my handgun from under the cab and flicked the safety off. I told myself I had 9 rounds. The radio spoke another coordinate, then another, the same ones, repeated. Then I felt it. Pressure against the back of the cab. Not a hit, not a slam, just weight. Testing. The trailer hitch creaked. Something scraped along the seam where the camper met the truck. Slow, like it was learning the shape of the cab by touch. I didn't look back. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the lot too fast, gravel spraying. Pressure lifted, the sound retreated. In the mirror, the trailer looked normal, closed, intact, quiet. The radio changed numbers again. Longer jump this time. I drove until the sky started to lighten. Not sunrise, just that false gray that tells you morning is coming whether you're ready or not. Eventually the number stations faded, and I had to turn the audio to hear anything. Then they stopped. Static filled the cab. I pulled over when the road widened enough to feel safe. Sat there with the engine idling, listening to nothing. That was when I realized the silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like losing the ability to see what was hunting me. I stayed there a long time without exiting the cab. Long enough for light to come up enough that the trees stopped looking like shapes and started looking like trees again. Whatever I thought I'd heard had found a way back out the same way it came in. I turned the static down until I could only barely hear it at all. I didn't open the trailer. I want that noted too. I sat there with the engine idling, listening. That was when I felt it again. Not sound, not movement, just pressure. Something shifted its weight in the trailer, not scrambling, not panicking. It was like a slow redistribution, like it had reached a decision. The radio was still silent. I remember thinking that if I turned my head, if I looked in the mirror, I would see something I couldn't afford to know for sure. So I didn't. The pressure moved forward, along the length of the trailer, toward the cab. It stopped directly behind me. No pushing, no testing, just there. I could feel it through the seat, through the frame, the mass close enough that the truck no longer felt like a separate thing. Like the cab and the trailer had become one enclosure. We were both inside it. I don't know why I looked. I think my eyes just did it on their own. The way they do when you feel something too close behind you. Your body wants confirmation before your brain can argue. Less than a second. In the rearview mirror, something was filling the space behind the cab. Not standing, not crouching, folded, pressed in on itself in a way that made the dimensions wrong. It was big, bigger than the trailer should have allowed. There was a mouth. I know that because I saw teeth, long ones, too many, set too far back, like the front of its face wasn't where the face actually began. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could put a name to. My hand had already moved toward the gun on the seat beside me. I don't remember deciding to reach for it. It was just there, part of the shape of panic. Then the thought arrived. What would a bullet even do to this? That wasn't fear, it was just assessment. The gun suddenly felt like a pitiful defense, like things would be worse if I tried it. I stopped moving. The thing behind me didn't move either. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't an animal in the way people mean when they say animal. It wasn't confused. It wasn't frantic. It was checking. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Long enough for my left hand to cramp around the wheel. Long enough for my breathing to stop sounding like mine. Then, very carefully, the weight eased back. Not retreating, just leaving. When it was gone, I heard leaves and twigs snapping off the road. I pulled out. I continued my route. The sun was setting when I heard it again, the numbers. I tuned out the static in my head, but I left the radio on its lowest volume. When it picked up the signal again, it was like cold water poured down my back. I turned the volume up. Different numbers, but they were changing too slowly to match the pace of my driving now. Farther away, the coordinates jumped hard, like something had crossed the boundary, had been hovering here for a long time. The voice didn't sound relieved. It didn't sound urgent. It just continued. I felt something loosen in my chest when I realized the numbers were no longer lining up with my direction of travel. Whatever it wasn't on me anymore. I finished the haul. Dropped the camper at the dealership lot just after noon. Signed the paperwork. Didn't linger. Nobody asked why I looked the way I did. Nobody asked anything at all. I drove another 30 miles before I pulled over and called it in. I told the dispatcher I thought I'd hauled an animal inside a sealed camper. I didn't say monster. I didn't say anything about radios or numbers. I stuck to the words that might survive being written down. They did send a unit. Everything up to now is exactly what I told the police. That isn't everything that happened. I've thought about that a lot. I think part of me already knew that if I opened it, I wouldn't be telling anyone anything at all. The officers who came were polite. Very polite. They listened. They nodded. They asked for the radio. They turned it on. Nothing. Just static. No numbers. No coordinates. No voice. One of them tried a few other bands. Same result. They didn't tell me I was wrong. They just wrote things down and thanked me for my time. They left and I was trying to plan somewhere to pick up my next meal. Then the other car arrived. Black. Long. No markings. I couldn't place the model. I didn't hear it pull up. The cops couldn't have been gone more than a minute. 2 men got out. Suits. Too neat. Not law enforcement. Not pretending to be. They didn't introduce themselves. One of them asked me if I still had the radio my father gave me. I said, yes. He nodded like that answered something for him. They told me the incident was being handled, that there was no further action required on my part, that I would not be contacted again about it. They didn't threaten me. They didn't warn me. They didn't need to. Before they left, one of them leaned in close enough that I could smell the fabric of his jacket, clean, new. He said very quietly that the broadcast wasn't anything to worry about. Then he said, if I were you, I wouldn't talk about this. It wouldn't like that. I nearly asked what the hell that meant, but they were already getting back in their cars. I actually got out to try and ask them, but they drove away. I went home after that, or what passes for it, the truck, the sleeper cab. I didn't turn the shortwave on again. I still don't. Because I know now that somewhere something is still moving, and somewhere else a system is keeping tabs on it. It just isn't talking where I can hear it anymore. But sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet enough, I find myself counting radio signs, road signs, mile markers, tree gaps, wondering what numbers that station may be rattling off to dead air.